morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I am your host, Sarah Marino, and welcome to another NETGEAR Insider webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about switching, but specifically switch stacking. So we have an expert here, Laurent, who's joining us from France, that will be going over this in depth. And so any of your questions about switch stacking will hopefully be answered. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask in the chat box below, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar. All right, go ahead, Laurent, take it away.
Hey, Sarah, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. This is Laurent Mazia. I'm the PLM for the smart and managed switches. Very happy. Thank you for joining today. Everything you wanted to know about switch stacking, that's going to be a in-depth presentation first, and we are going to use that new feature we just introduced, advanced stacking between 3300s and 4300s as an example, but really the takeaway for today's presentation is really, show you the best practice, state-of-the-art stacking in between NETGEAR Stackable series. So without further ado, let's start. That's our introduction. Usually, again, stacking is a good example for that. NETGEAR is strongly different from everybody else on this market because we do focus on the SMB market with reliable, affordable, and easy to use solutions. And that's very important. Why? Because SMB products, SMB customers deserve the exact same reliability as big Cisco's. And all the NETGEAR products come with real lifetime. At NETGEAR, lifetime means lifetime. It's not like HP or Cisco with the end of life where the lifetime stops. That's not true. 25 years from now, NETGEAR products will be replaced should they fail. Affordability, well, for sure, our products must be more affordable than enterprise vendors, and maybe most importantly, easy to use. We strive to simplify the management, the ongoing management tasks, the installation with our easy-to-use web interface. So you will see today with stacking, as you know, we are going to focus on switching today, but remember, at NETGEAR, we have a lot of switches. We probably have the most comprehensive portfolio for SMBs. We also have excellent Wi-Fi, access points, controller, cloud, or even inside cloud managed solutions now, and we have a strong portfolio for storage. So this is our complete switching portfolio. Today, we are going to focus on the S3300s first, the most cost-effective smart switches with stacking in the marketplace to date. And because we just have this new capability, we are going to have a couple of these 4300s higher-end 10 gig platforms that will be able to seamlessly stack with the 3300s. That's what we are going to see today. Okay. Sorry about that. So the NETGEAR 10 gig portfolio is something real interesting today because 10 gigabit becomes prevalent for many applications, not only in data centers, not only at enterprise, but for our small and medium customers, a whole lot of new applications, including cloud, including servers, virtualization, require more bandwidth. So 10 gigabit is not only for servers, it's only for a 10 gig aggregation in between switches. And that's the main reason why we have a very fast growing portfolio of switches supporting 10 gig. The 3300s were a good second or even third attempt in the smart switch category. Those cost-effective stackable platforms were introduced a couple years ago, and now they are well known on the marketplace, very successful, replacing all previous stackable platforms for NETGEAR smart switches. Why? Because they come with full 10 gig assortment on the right-hand side, 4 ports of 10 gig, 2 copper and 2 fiber for every models. We have true stacking. That's what we are going to experience today. We have 24 and 48 port models with or without PoE. So those 4 models are available right now: 28X, 28X PoE Plus, 52X and 52X PoE+. So 4 models, 24 or 48 ports, 1 gig, PoE or not, and then 4 totally dedicated 10 gig uplinks so that you have 2 fiber and 2 copper ready to use, either for uplinks or downlinks or for stacking. So, as a short introduction, before we get our hands on these products, what is stacking? Well, usually, 10, 15 years ago, that was only for fully managed switch platforms, so higher end series, more costly. But it came with NETGEAR first, actually, on the smart switches. And a stack is actually a name, meaning that we are going to group several switches, many switches, into one logical unit. So usually that comes either with a stacking module or with, onboard embedded 10 gig ports. That's what we do now. And this virtual chassis system, let's call it a logical unit, will behave as a single switch. So the other switches on the network, the host, the other clients, will see that logical units as a single switch. And you, as an administrator, for instance, you will manage, configure, deploy, and manage that switch as a single unit as well. So a real stacking mechanism usually comes with redundancy. It means that this stack continues to operate even if one switch somewhere in the stack fails. So why is that good? Well, because we know we have other means, right? We have other technologies in order to daisy chain or assemble several switches together. One of them, and there is some confusion sometimes between stacking and link aggregation. One of them is called 802.3ad, now 802.3ax, link aggregation. Is that good enough? Well, first of all, when you use a LAG, a link aggregation group in between two switches, you will obviously have increased capacity because you are going to virtually assemble several ports into one logical bigger pipe using several ports in the same link aggregation group. You will add some redundancy, especially with LACP. You can survive if one port gets disconnected. You get some load balancing. Don't forget that on the smart switch category, the parsing, the hashing algorithm only comes based on destination MAC address, that's all, but that lets your traffic going through several links. So link aggregation is okay, but you still have two standalone switches, two totally independent switches. So when you have a lot more than that, when you have several switches, when you have deployments with a lot of switches at the edge, for instance, grouping them together will be way more elegant because you will have far less switches to install, far less switches to maintain. So switches can be more scalable this way. You will have bigger switches. You will increase redundancy because distributed link aggregation will be one of the main benefits. Grouping ports in between switches across several switches will raise that level of redundancy because if one switch fails, you have another path anyway in your connection up to the core or down to your host. Management is simplified because we have obviously one IP address for all switches in the stack, and this is very redundant because of that distributed link aggregation across the stack. Just imagine if you have one group of switches at the edge, if you connect a few of them, several of them, to the core using a distributed lag, then you can survive to many bad situations. So 10 gig comes standard with those 3300s. That's what we are going to use for stacking. We can use either copper, 10 gig, you can see 2 ports there, or 10 gig fiber. The limitation is only 2 ports at a single point of time can be used for stacking. So the copper ports, the fiber ports, or one of each. That will depend on your topology. So this is our typical customer application. Usually 3300s stackable switches are ideal for SMB customers that want a collapsed core. It means a group of switches at the center of the network connecting the servers upwards, but also downwards connecting all the clients. So a virtual big chassis switch. Obviously, you can have several other equipment hooked to it, but distributed link aggregation this way is very powerful for your servers and Hyper-Vs up there, and very good as well should you have other switches south connecting to the edge. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint almost, because now we want to go over this stacking. How are we going to demonstrate that? Well, we are going to form a stack of 3300s and use that new stacking capability with 10 gig 4300s as well. So 2 weeks ago, we just introduced that new capability. Now, 3300s that are excellent 1 gig switches with 10 gig uplinks, stackable series, can welcome pure 10 gig switches from the 4300 line, 12X, 12F, and 24X in order to bring abundant additional 10 gig connectivity. Let's check it out. This new stacking capability is only based out a new firmware, so that's a firmware upgrade. That's very good. We will see that when there is some servers and storage applications that require way more 10 gig ports than what the S3300s can provide with their remaining 10 gig ports. So that's scalable, and that will enhance load balancing topologies and redundant topologies. So technically speaking, don't be confused. 4300s are higher end. They are full layer 3 platforms. 3300s are cost-effective layer 2 plus platforms. When we are going to do that, we are going to transform the 4300s into S3300 switches with layer 2 plus capabilities. Okay, so that's kind of a scale down. Obviously, that's not perpetual. As soon as our customers will want to stop that and get their 4300 feature set back, stop stacking, obviously, the mixed stacking thing, they will just re-upgrade the firmware on the 4300s. That's our goal. We want to, for instance, in a typical collapsed core installation with a group of 3300s connecting to servers and hosts and clients at the same time at the center of a typical SMB network, we want to add 2 or more pure 10 gig switches to that same stack with the same ease of management so that we have abundant additional 10 gig connectivity. We can achieve all these great distributed lags across those switches that will be meant to be the master, and the redundant stack master at the top will see that. So in order to do that, you will find on the S3300 product pages now the technical documentation about this mixed stacking brand new capability. And for this, we managed to put together this app notes that gives real step-by-step operations. So that's our proposal. Today, we want to go over this step-by-step configuration. First, we are going to create a S3300 stack from nowhere, just taking 3 switches out of the box and stack them. And then second, we are going to add a 10 gig M4300 switch to that stack. Okay, so this is our initial topology. We have 3 S3300 switches, a 52X 48-port switch non-PoE with the 4 10 gig uplinks, a 52X-PoE plus. So this one comes with 48 port of PoE plus ports. And then a third one, a 24-port PoE, 28X-PoE plus. So technically, well, we just extract those brand new switches out of their box. We are going to hook the first switch to my network, right? So I have an incoming downlink coming from my network in order to get that switch on my network. And I'm going to daisy chain those switches this way so that they can also be on the same network. At this stage, I'm going to power them all together, and they are obviously all standalone all independent. That's why you can see this little one on each of them. So the thing is that we need first to locate and to discover the IP address of that first switch, right? So in order to do that, there is several means. We can use the NETGEAR Smart Control Center, which is a free software that comes on the CD with every switches that's available for Windows on the netgear.com/support website. We also, alternatively, can use a sniffer, or better, the LLDP table on the switch that the first 3300 switch is connected to. So in my network, this is a 4300 switch that I have. So my 4300 unit will show this in the system LLDP remote device inventory. I can detect 3 entries, and based on the MAC address, I know now the IP address of my first switch. So let's click on that, and I'm going to log onto the first S3300 switch up there. And we know that the default password for all NETGEAR smart switches is password. At this time, well, I am suspecting that I need to upgrade the S3300 first switch firmware. Why? Because it is very important when we form a new stack that all switches run the exact same firmware. We just can't from scratch create a new stack if switches run a different firmware. So for the sake of that demonstration, we made the decision to go over a firmware update should the first switch run another firmware. You have the firmware information directly on the product label in the product box. So in order to do that, we go to the netgear.com support website, enter the GS752TX or the product name, 3352X name on it, and we'll go to the download page to get that latest 6617 firmware. We are going to bring that file, this STK firmware, back to our hard drive and go to the maintenance download section in order to browse my hard drive and get this firmware. When clicking apply, we are going to trigger the HTTP file download, and that screen will stand for maybe 2 minutes until the file transfer is over. So when the file transfer is over, we have that message that the HTTP transfer was completed successfully. Now we've got to reboot the switch, because when we overwrite the image number 1, for instance, in our switch, well, we upgraded the firmware physically on that storage place. But then in order to have it run, we need to reboot the switch. So that's what we are going to achieve by going to maintenance, reset, and obviously you can check if just before that the image 1 was correctly updated with 6617, and that this image 1 is the current next active image. Okay, that's very important. But assuming that the switch is out of the box, that should be the case by default. So again, we go to maintenance, reset, device reboot, and that will trigger the reboot. Okay, so now we can relog with password onto this very same IP address. I'm logging into this first switch, and I see on the welcome page, system management, my new firmware number here, 6617. I'm all ready to go, assuming that the 2 other switches also run 6617 now. So first thing, everything you wanted to know for stacking, the first thing you need to do to prepare a switch for stacking, we need to log onto that switch and configure the switch priority. That's a very strong requirement. We need to prepare that switch, and for that first switch, we are going to enter 12 over here. 12, why? Because we want that 12 be the stack master switch priority. This way, this switch will always be elected as the stack master until another switch with a higher priority, goes up to 15, is configured. Okay, so by now, our decision is to have a 12 over there so that the first switch in the pile will always be the master until we have a higher priority. So we are going to click apply, and when done, we can check that this 12 new switch priorities ticked, and that's correctly the case. Okay, second thing, after the switch priority, we remain into the system, stacking, and after the stack configuration, we go to the stack port configuration. Stacking, advanced stack port configuration. Here we see that we have 4 ports for now. Those are the 4 10 gig ports available for stacking. And we know that we can select up to 2 of them, whatever, 2 of them, to convert them into the stack mode. Right now, their running stack mode is Ethernet. It means that by default, out of the box, the switch can stack because the 10 gig ports behave as typical standard Ethernet ports. So we are going to select the 2 copper ports, the port number 40 and 50 on the right-hand side, select stack in their configured stack mode and click apply. After a couple seconds, we are going to be back to that page and we can check if the if the configured stack mode is well stacked. That's the case. We have now stacked as a configured stack mode for 49 and 50. But you know what? We still have Ethernet in running stack mode. Well, why? Because the change will require a reboot. The switch will not change this way the running mode. This is a configuration thing that can be applied only during a boot. So we know that this will require a reboot later. So we are going to do that now. That will be done. We will have the first switch ready to welcome new members in that stack. So we go to the maintenance reset, device reboot, and check that box and click apply. So now we did the first switch, we can let it boot, right? And we need to prepare the second switch. So by now, I am assuming that all my new switches coming out of the box, they come with the right firm, right? So the right firmware 6617. If that's not the case, remember, you need to upgrade those switches to the same firmware, same as for the first switch, in order to have a successful stack creation. So we say that's good. We're now going to the system stacking system. That's the first level, right? For the sake of that exercise today, you can actually have a quick look over there. System is the level 0, or let's say level 1. So we manage the switch IP configuration. We see the devices. We have the stacking, the SNMP, services, and the time schedule if you want to have PWE timer, for instance. So everything level 1 will be there. Level 2, layer 2 is switching. Layer 3 is routing, QoS security. That's how we organize this web interface so that it's the most intuitive thing as possible. So level 1 system, go back to stacking. We know that we have 2 things to do, right? For the second switch, we need to configure the switch priority in order to have the right chronology in the election for the stack master and the redundant master. We'll see that. And also, we need to configure the stacking ports. So first, we go to the advanced stack configuration. And in the stack configuration, we check that box. We have only 1 switch, obviously. This second switch is still standalone. We are going to have a just lower priority. After 12, we want to have 10 now, so that this second switch will not be the master, but that should be elected, that will be elected as a backup master. We just click apply, and then now we can check if the switch priority was correctly set, and that's the case. This is number 10 now. Again, this switch is still standalone, right? So that's perfectly normal. If you see their management unit, that switch is the management unit of the stack. In that stack, there is only that switch. That's a stackable switch. Everything is on order. But next, when that switch will join another stack with that priority, we hope and we know that that switch will be elected as a backup master. Second thing to do, we go to the stacking ports, and this time, because we have that switch in another location, maybe after the test bench, we are going to select one copper port and one fiber port for the stacking mode. So we click on those two rows and we configure the stack mode, click apply, and then you can check that the configured stack mode changed to stack for both ports, but the running stack mode obviously is still Ethernet, because we know that the actual change will require a reboot for the running mode. So we will reboot that switch later, log onto the third switch now. Remember, we have that LLDP table from the host switch above those three guys that told us the IP address thanks to the LLDP compliance. So I am logging to the 171. I'm just checking that the firmware is correct. That's the case. Let's go straight to the system stacking advanced stack configuration. This time, I don't want that guy being elected as the master switch by default. So I'm going to pick the lowest switch priority so that I make absolutely sure this switch will remain as a member, as a simple member of my future stack. So I'm going to switch that switch priority from unassigned to 1, click apply, and then you can check real quick that this was taken care of. Now, go to the stack port configuration. Again, for this third switch, I'm going to pick a copper port and a fiber port, change that setting to stack, click apply, and I will be able to control that my two ports are now correctly configured as stack ports, but still running the stack mode. So this third switch will also require a reboot in order to change that. That's what we are going to do now. We remove the power code and power off the second switch and the third switch. You didn't see me save the running configuration on these smart switches. Why? Because on a NETGEAR smart switch, everything due on the web GUI is immediately saved into the startup configuration file. Okay, so there is no additional step for saving the running configuration into the startup configuration file. So I just shut down those two switches, and we don't need to shut down the first one because we did reboot that one a couple of minutes ago. Now we are going to disconnect the daisy chain ports that were over there, and we can now deploy our stacking ports. So I have my stacking ports over there that are copper. The first switch is going to the second switch using copper, and then the second switch using fiber is going, so that's a fiber DAC cable actually in my test bench, going to the third switch, and I have a additional copper ports going back to the first switch. Okay, so I stay like that. Switch is powered down for the members, only the master switch that was rebooted accordingly already up, and then I just handle those stacking links. When it's done, I am going to power the second switch only. Okay, I'm going to power that switch only because I want to facilitate the switch discovery. That's how we do for 100% performance and success. We power the first switch, and we are going to wait for maybe 10 to 15 seconds before we are going to power the third switch, so that we know that the second switch will arrive after the 100-second boot time in advance, and we are going to, facilitate that switch discovery, because that guy, the first switch, is perpetually trying to welcome new members in that stack. So this first switch was powered on. I am powering on that second switch, and 15 seconds later, say, I'm going to power up this third switch. After 1 minute or two, magically, I am going to observe that the second switch went from 1 to 2. So the second switch with the priority number 12 is now the second switch in my stack, which is good. And the third switch, because it came a little bit later into the process for the election and the stack creation, now got this number 3, which was exactly the target, okay? So now we can relog onto the first switch because we know that that first switch is the new stack master. So we log to that first switch using the same IP address that was 1081.67. The password is obviously still password. And well, on the welcome page, system management, we already see that this switch now is a real stack. So the stack master handles the entire stack GUI. It runs the entire management plane, and it will handle a lot of the control plane as well, especially for beyond layer 2 local switching, especially for spanning tree, layer 3 routing, and all that. So we see that, well, now we have several temperature sensors. We have more than 2 fans, and that's perfectly normal because this switch all of a sudden became a bigger switch with additional blades, if you wish, or additional switch members. So going to the stack topology, you can go to System, Device View. This is on the level layer 1 tab. Device View is the second entry, and that's pretty cool because we see now the 3 switches under this IP address. My virtual switch was formed. So everything is okay. I can actually click on these ports with the right button and configure those ports, or go to the statistics to actually observe the stacking ports. So now we go to the go back to the stacking section, system stacking, advanced stack configuration, and we can check those switch priorities, and everything is okay. And now you see that the second switch with the second highest priority is a stack member, but his standby status is activated. So that's the exact thing we wanted. Now we have a redundant stack because the first switch is the management unit. So in my language, the master switch. And the second switch is the secondary master because it will handle this operating standby role should the first switch die or be removed from the stack instantly. After, let's say, 40 to 50 seconds, the stack will be up again with that second switch re-elected as the new master. That's the role of the secondary master, the redundant master. That's extremely important to correctly plan for it, because yes, when we will have this distributed link aggregation from the master switch and from other switches going up to the core, for instance, or to a server, we will have to make sure that the master switch and its secondary backup master will be included in that distributed lag, so that we make absolutely sure that the main uplink or the main downlink always survive whatever can bad happen to the master switch. So this is good. We have our correct topology now. We can go and see the stacking, advanced stack port configuration, and see that now we have all our units available. So we don't only have one, the unit 1, but we also show unit 2 and unit 3. The system really considers this stack as a virtual chassis, really. Means that we have several blades, and the blade number is the unit number. Now we see the 4 ports that can be picked and configured as a stack or Ethernet mode, and we have our correct configuration that we just did previously. And now we see that the running stack mode is the same as the configured stack mode because all these switches did reboot. You can see here at a glance the actual performance. So that's a very good information in order to measure which traffic, how much traffic you have in between your switches for the stack. If you have a lot of north-south traffic or east-west traffic across the stack, you see the link speed, which is obviously 10 gig. You see the transmit rate for transmit and the receive data rate. So in megabit per second, you can actually measure each stacking ports, see if you oversubscribe them or not. Okay, so now we have an extra step to do in order to prepare that stack for the mixed stacking. Because remember, the last thing we need to do now is to welcome a pure 10 gig switch, add a new 10 gig switch into that stack. So for that, the S3300 switches need to be upgraded to a brand new image that is now available on the website. It's called 66.4.x. So I did that for you. I went to the NETGEAR support website. I went to the S3300 models, any of them, and I did bring the 66.4.2 firmware back to my computer. And now I am actually going to upload, or I should say download, because I'm the switch, I'm going to download that switch into my image 1 slot. I'm going to do that only on my switch master, obviously. By doing that, I will actually automatically upgrade the firmware across the stack for all switches in the stack. So I'm selecting this 6642 new image, and I will click apply. Before rebooting my switch, I should say before rebooting my stack, let's control in the maintenance file management tab that my 6642 is correctly was correctly downloaded into the image 1 slot, and that the current active image 1, that's what it is, but the next active image is correctly set to be image 1, right? So if that's not the case for any mysterious reason, you need to go to dual image configuration to reset that, because if you upgrade the image 1, you need to also make sure that the image 1 will be the next active one at during the next reboot. So now we are all set. Well, image 1 is correctly updated for 6642. We just go to maintenance, we set device reboot, we check this, it's by default, but you can control that all the switches will be rebooted over there, and click apply. So we now have to wait until the stack master gets back alive, and when it's the case, 130 seconds later, we can relog onto the stack master and see that everything seems all right, and now we are running the 6642 firmware across the entire stack. Okay? So we did the first thing, we did the most important thing, we formed a virtual big chassis switch. It's a true stacking using 3 S3300 switches. Now we are going to insert a 4300 switch first in that topology, and later on we want that new switch make part of the stack as well. So the first step is obviously take out a new 4300 10 gig switch. I chose the 24X. Sorry, I chose the 12X12F. That's a 24 port switch with 12 fiber SFP plus ports and 12 copper ports, all independent. So 12 plus 12 simultaneously, you have 24 port 10 gig line rate. Why is it cool? Because, well, you never know. You have servers and storage arrays, sometimes coming with copper, some other times coming with fiber, especially if they are more study or enterprise-like. And for that reason, having half and half implementation with copper and fiber is a good thing. You will see also that the form factor is quite different. That's a half-width switch, so that's also a good thing. You can start small in your rack with the rack mount kit. You have the big ears on the right-hand side over there, but should you want to add capacity to double the port count, add redundancy, later on you can add a second identical or 24 port copper new 10 gig switch in that same U with the same rack mount kit. Another small part in the middle comes in, and you can juxtapose, have 2 switches in the same U. So that's a good form factor. So what we are doing now, we are just powering that switch up and hooking that switch to 1 port on our stack. So obviously this switch for now is still a 4300, layer 3 switch running in standalone mode. So we need to learn the 4300 switch IP address because, as usual, when you want to add a new switch to a stack, you need to prepare it. And the summary is, well, you need to prepare the stack master management priority in order to make sure the switch will be or not the switch master or the backup master. And second, you need to set up those stacking ports in order to have that switch after reboot capability for joining a new stack. So we need to log to that 4300 switch. And for that, we need to go back to our S3300 stack. And we are going to use again the system LLDP table, because on the smart switches as well, we have a LLDP table capability. So instead of logging to the M4300 console using the CLI or the USB cable, that's a very elegant way. The S3300 stack that we have of delivering that piece of information for you. System LLDP show the entire neighbor's information, and we see that we have that switch over there that got this 1080.176 address. That's good. So now we can use that piece of information, and we now can log onto the 4300 10D switch. That's a very equivalent GUI. There's some more features in the 4300 lines, but the general philosophy is the same. That's why we can claim that the NETGEAR switches are rather simple to use, because at least the GUI remains very intuitive, even for the most high-end top-of-the-line switches. So we see that the 4300 switch runs the 12.02.15 firmware in my example now. So this is not good, because in order to have that mixed stacking capability, we require the same software as for S3300, which was 6642 as a minimum. But, well, in order to be able to absorb that new 6642 firmware, my 4300 switch first require the latest and greatest image as a minimum 12.02.17. So my first stack now going to maintenance and upgrade is to pick that 12.02.17 in order to upgrade that switch, and click open. Then I click apply, and then I will wait until I see that message that the HTTP download maintenance upgrade, HTTP file upgrade, until I see that download was done correctly. So same thing, I need to make sure that my image 1 was the one that got that new 12.02.17, and that this one will be the next active one. The presentation is slightly different, but again, the philosophy is pretty much the same. So if that's the case, I now can go to maintenance, and before resetting, just making sure if the switch was not that brand new, maybe you can go and profit to go maintenance reset factory default in order to make sure that everything is wiped out from the switch, and then going quietly to maintenance factory default apply. When it's done, you can go to the maintenance reset, and we are going to save the configuration. The managed switches, the fully managed switches, are slightly different for that. It means that they require this configuration save in order to fix the starter config. If not, well, you only have a running config, but everything you do is kind of lost at the next reboot. So that's what we want to make sure. We need to check this save prior to reboot, and we click apply. So the switch will take another 100 seconds to reboot, and when the switch is back on, I will go back and check that my 12.02.17 is now there. That's the minimum requirement. All latest images going forward will work. So 12.02.17 is the minimum one in order to go to the new software. So now I went to the 3300 product support pages and got this M4300 version of 66.4.2, which is the special firmware allowing for mixed stacking. So I am going to re-upgrade this very switch with 66.4.2 now with the same maintenance file upgrade process. I then can click open and apply until I see that the software upgrade through HTTP went well. Now, a last check before the reboot, I see that 6642 will be the next active image in image 1. So we are now all set to reboot our switch, okay? Let's do that now, and we can relog onto that 4300 switch and control that the actual running software version is 66.4.2. So now you have a switch running the exact same software than the other 3300 smart switches over there. So this switch is ready to go. What do we need to do? Well, exact same thing. You now get back the exact same GUI as the 3300s. You can go to System, Stacking, Advanced Stack Configuration, and in the switch priority, I'm going to select 15 because I want that switch to be the main master management unit because that's the most capable switch I have in my stack. 15. So 15 is the highest. I will make sure that switch gets elected as the switch master. The second switch that was previously the master will be the backup management unit moving forward. So switch priority is the first thing I select. I click apply and I check that this was changed accordingly. Second thing is obviously the stacking ports. I have 4 ports available now for stacking on the 10 gig 4300s in that process. I'm going to select 2 of them. I'm going to select the port 21 and 22. Clicking apply, I see that those ports are now configured as stacking ports, but obviously their running mode is still Ethernet because that will require a reboot. Okay, so now instead of rebooting, we just power down that 4300 switch so that we can disconnect the previous daisy chain link I had over there. And I can now use my stacking links, and with those 21 and 22 ports over there, I can hook and modify the stacking topology. So I am just inserting this switch in first position, and I respect the typical 3300 stacking topology. So my 4300 switch is going to connect to the second switch, which is the first S3300, and I'm going back to my 43 from the last switch, so that I have a ring, so that I can survive to any possible bad situations that way. So now that I have done that, I can actually power up my 4300 switch, and after the boot, my 4300 switch shows 4 as a number, because that's the 4th switch joining that stack. That's exactly what we wanted. But the stack master LED light is down because this switch is not the master. We still have that little dot on the right-hand side of the switch number unit on the 3300 first switch that shows that switch is the master. The thing is that we did not trigger any re-election by adding a new member. That will need to be done later. So far, what we just did is adding a new member. So if we relog onto our stack, the IP address didn't change, right? We are still logging onto the first S3300 switch, acting as a stack master, 1081.67. I see now that I have way more blades somehow, and everything is all right. If I go to the stack topology, hurrah! I see my 10 gig 4300 switch actually at the bottom in that graphical representation, but I see the number 4, and this switch is not the stack master as of yet. So if I go to the system stacking advanced stack configuration, I can monitor my stack and all switches states, and obviously the first 3300 switch, the switch number 1, is still the master. The second S3300 is still the operating standby, despite the switch priority. That's normal, because again, no re-election was triggered because we just added a switch, so there's no real reason for the stack to change that. So we need to trigger that. Before we can go to the stack ports, it's always very important to control that all stacking links are up and running for all models. So we can check over there that the port number 21 and the port number 22 on my fourth unit, my 4300 switch, are up and running at Stackable. So everything runs perfect. Okay, so we now want to move the management role. So you have two solutions. Either you want to reboot the entire stack, but you have a more elegant solution, going to System, Stacking, Advanced, and Stack Configuration. We can move via software the management unit to the switch number 4. And by doing that, you trigger the entire stack process for the re-election. And by doing that, we want that the switch with the highest priority be elected as the new master. So we go and we click OK.
All right.
Yes.
I just want to, we have 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get 2 questions. So whenever you find a good stopping point, we'll start answering questions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, no problem. So let's trigger that re-election by clicking OK. The stack gets offline for a couple seconds, I would say 30 to 40 seconds, and that's during that time the re-election is triggered. Now this page should hold with transferring data, and as soon as the stack reloads, we can observe physically that the management stack master LED light will be on the first switch, the 4300 switch, which is perfect. And we don't have any dot anymore on the right-hand side of the switch number on the second switch over there. It means that the management role moves away from that switch and now is on the first 4300 switch. That's the exact thing we wanted. So we can relog onto the stack, but that's not the S3300 previous master IP address anymore. That's my 4300 switch IP. So we're logging onto that new master. We show the welcome page, system management. Physically, we are logging onto the 4300 switch now. So going to the stacking topology, system, device view, we can clearly see the LED on for the stack master. That's where you are logging into. Okay, so we can again check the stack status, and everything looks perfect because the stack, the last switch, the 4300 switch that we just added with the priority number 15, got this management role. And because the entire re-election was triggered, the first switch that was previously the management switch now is a member with the operating standby mode, meaning that's the secondary master, the backup management unit, ready to go should the 4300 master switch fail. So now you have a perfectly running 4300/3300 stack, and I hope that this demo was interesting for you. I hope that you got it. I am going to stop there and go over your questions.
Thank you, Laurent. Yeah, so everyone that is wondering where this webinar will be posted, you can find it on the US PowerShip portal, and it'll also be posted on our YouTube page and under webinars and hopefully in the community. So we have a few resources there. So yes, for questions, we have a question from Jonathan, and he's wondering, is the M4300 24x24F supported? He didn't see it mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, and wants to know if it's not supported right now, if it will have that capability later.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I can read the questions, actually. Thank you, Jonathan. So that's a good question. The answer is no. So we only have the 12x12F that you see on that chart, and then we have the 24x. So the two 24 ports, half-width versions are supported as of now, and we will hear our voice customers, and obviously we could in the future, although we don't have real immediate plans for it, add more switches. Right now, only 24 port standing models, 12x, 12F, and 24x are supported. We thought that was the right size for a typical S3300 SMB collapsed core installation. So the second question is, can you fix the behavior of SCC in a multi-home NIC environments. Oh, so I hear you, Jonathan. SCC is a piece of software that we use for managing smart switches in order to discover them and upgrade the firmware and log onto the GUI with more ease. And you're right, when your PC is equipped with several NICs, well, we don't really manage that, and there's a whole lot of issues that you are pointing out. So is there a way to fix that? Certainly. I am going to log your question onto the customer enhancement request. Again, there is plenty of other means for IP management, but I hear you, and if we get some more votes, we will do that. So as a reminder, you know, we now have a very good forum on the NETGEAR community. So that's a good place in order to ask questions and ask for updates or customer enhancements or even fixes or bug fixes. So please use that, create posts. PLMs are always monitoring this. Second, we don't see the V6 firmware on the 4300 on the website, only the 12.0. That's normal because that's only for the 3300 customers. So you will find the 6642 and moving forward the 664X branch of software both for 3300s and 4300s on the S3300 web pages. Why? Because we don't want to add any confusion for the 4300 customers. This only addresses 3300 issues and customer requests for adding 10 gig onto the 3300s. So the 4300 firmware is bundled with the 3300's V6 firmware, to answer your question. So go to the S3300 page instead. And I have a last question, which is good. Can we do this with the GS752TXS? So the answer is no, unfortunately, but I understand the concern here. The 3300s are the NETGEAR third generation of smart switches with stacking. So all the prior generations, GS724TS and 48TS, and then GS728TS and 52TS, and then the GS752TXS and 28TXS. All these are prior generations, and well, we cannot do anything for them. So this is working only with the latest generation of S3300s. So we really encourage all the customers, when possible, to upgrade and go to the S3300s instead. So thank you. Any other question on the chat box? You have 1 minute left.
Yeah. So if there aren't any more questions, thank you everyone for joining. We hope this was a really informative webinar for you, and we will see you next time. There is those reminder emails that you guys get. There is a link to download a PDF which has the schedule for all the future webinars, and then there is a button to register. So I know that if that wasn't clear, I just wanted to make that clear. And so we are having a Insight webinar next Tuesday on the 14th. So if you want to join us then we'll see you there. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.